Hey guys, come on in. Welcome to Campus Church. If you have been here a lot of times, we're so grateful that you've come back. And if you're here for the first time, we're so grateful that you have decided to take your Thursday. I'm still on Thursday. Take your Sunday and be here and to brave the cold and the wind. And we're grateful that you're here tonight. My name is Mike, and I have the privilege of being the pastor here. Welcome back to several of you guys getting back from vacation. A little jealous, coming back from Hawaii, coming back from New Zealand. I know, man, these are the people you want to be friends with at vacation time. And so we're going to get started here in a moment, but I want to show you a video first. You've heard us mention about Alpha program. Alpha is designed for really a spectrum of people who want to ask questions about the faith, who want to ask about, hey, I got questions about God, I have questions about purpose. So guys, you go ahead and pause that music. Sorry. Questions about God, questions about faith, questions about purpose, ethics, those sorts of things, and so we're going to be leading an Alpha course on UVic campus, and we're partnering with Lambert Park Church, we're partnering with University Christian Ministries, and it's going to be great. And so it's starting on Wednesday, and so I want to show you just a quick little promo video, just so you have an idea of what Alpha is all about, so that you can better be praying for it in the coming days. And then after this video, I'm going to invite Gareth to come up and pray for this semester of Alpha. So check this video out, and then we're going to pray together.
Every day we ask so many questions. What should I wear? What's the weather going to be like? How am I going to fit everything in? But then there are those bigger questions, like why am I here? Where am I headed? Is there water lines in this?
So we're real excited about being part of this program. It's going to be on Wednesday nights on campus at UVic, 6 o'clock, sorry. There'll be dinner, there'll be a video teaching time, and then really the heart and soul of Alpha is the time where you get together with about 8 to 12 others around a table, the same 8 to 12 folks for the whole 11 weeks, and you just dive into the questions of of whatever that topic was. And so really looking forward to it. If you know anybody who's on the UVic campus or who is who's maybe a university-aged person that you think would like to be a part of it, would love to have them come. It doesn't cost a thing, and so we'd love to have them come join us. Or if you would like to be a part of a program like that, and you're like, well, I'm not in university anymore, but I would love to visit some of these questions and discuss these things. There's an Alpha group meeting in Oak Bay that we know of. We're not putting this one on, but we're friends with the folks who are doing that one, and that one starts tomorrow night. And so if you're interested in being part of that, that one starts tomorrow night, and the one on UVic starts Wednesday night. And so I'm going to invite Gareth to come up. And Gareth has been involved with university ministry for a long time, and has prayed many times over that campus. And so I know you have a heart to see university students ask these questions and discuss these questions. So would you pray for this program and pray that God would draw people to Himself over the next 11 weeks.
It's been a privilege of mine to be part of UCN for about 10 years. God gave me a burden for the university about 10 years, or more than that. And it's just a joy to see this thing happen. It's just a joy to see Mike and this church getting behind each other. So it's great to me. Will you join me in prayer, please? Father, I want to thank you for the Alpha program. I want to thank you for the many tens of thousands of people around the world who have come to faith in you through this program. Thank you for Nicky Gumbel and the vision he had when he began this in London so many years ago. Father, I want to pray for Tony and for Myers, leader of UCN on campus, as they are about to birth this program on campus. But Father, I'm not forgetful of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and Power to Change and the Catholic students, the Christian students, who have all come behind this, Father, and I'm just so excited about that. I pray, Lord, that you will bless Tony and Miles as they lead. I pray that you will bless Pastor Mike, and understand he's going to MC these meetings. I just pray an anointing and blessing upon him. And Father, I pray particularly for the Christian students on campus, Lord, that you would light a fire in them. Give them boldness, Lord, to invite their peers to come along. Particularly, Lord, for those many Christians on campus who are not at present involved in the Christian ministry in any way. Father, would you initiate in them, Lord, a desire to be a greater witness on campus and to use Alpha as a tool that they can use. So, Father, we just commit these next 11 weeks to you. All the students that will go through this program. And Lord, that you would put your anointing, your presence would be present there in every one of these meetings, Lord. That every student who comes there with a question might find that question being answered by your Spirit within their souls. I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, welcome here again. And, if you're able to, we'll invite you to stand with us as we begin to worship. We've done this song before. This is one of those songs that's got a bunch of woes and stuff like that.
Yes.
Mike is a big fan of these types of songs. So if you're lost about what you should be singing, just listen for him, because I'm sure he's going to be just hollering it out as loud as he can. So let's worship together here.
Oh
Father God, I pray, just as we continue, Lord, you would fix our eyes on you. Lord, would you open our hearts just to know you more, Lord? Would you be our vision, Lord? Would you just be the lens that we see the world through? Father, we declare your glory, Lord. We declare your rule and your reign. Father God, I pray, that you would help us, Lord, to focus our eyes on you, Lord, that we would fix our eyes on the one who can give us life, Lord. And not only life, but life abundant, Lord, life to the full. Lord, help us to seek that fullness, Lord, that only you can offer. Father, you are good. We love you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Take a seat.
Sometimes life can feel like a race, and I don't necessarily mean a race like you're trying to beat everyone else, although maybe sometimes that too. Sometimes life can just feel like a long distance race. Sometimes maybe you have moments where you're like, man, if I can just get over this next hill, man, if I can just make it around this corner. But the truth is that we're all moving forward to an end destination, and some people might be further along than we are. Some people might be coming along behind of us. There might be people who have run their race already, and we draw inspiration from them. And that metaphor, I think, is a powerful metaphor heading into a new year. And it's actually a metaphor that the Bible uses, I think, pretty strongly. And so to kick tonight off, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to invite Travis up. I searched and searched for a professional racer. And when I couldn't find one, Travis agreed to... No, Travis, come on, have a seat and grab this microphone. So not long ago, you did do a race. Now, was it half marathon?
Yep.
So half marathon, and I remembered that, and I was thinking, man, I have never even come close to a half marathon. And so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit to get us into this thinking about running races. How did you prepare when you when this thing was coming up in your life? What did you do to train for it? How did you prepare for this thing? And maybe what was it? Maybe tell us for sure what it was.
Yeah, it was a half marathon that I did. It was last October, and it started with really just wanting to become healthier physically and joining a running group. And so the training really was just building up over months leading up to the race of increasing my runs every Sunday longer and longer, increasing, working on speed training, working on hills and other fun things that I never would have done by myself. For sure.
Yeah, it helps when you have other people to spur you along, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Being surrounded with people kind of driving and pulling and setting an example for each other and encouraging is definitely a difference maker.
That's awesome. So in the process of training and then running the thing, what was maybe a surprise, or what was the most difficult part that came at you that maybe you weren't expecting, or
during the race
that
itself?
or during the training and the race? What was the difficult thing?
Hills were difficult, but in the race it was specifically kilometers 17 through 21.
I've heard
and this thing right here. Yes.
Wow. So when you got to that one, how did you get through that? Because you finished, obviously, you survived.
For sure, yeah.
So how?
I think kind of barely.
So how? Like you hit mile 17, you hit kilometer 17, or
Yeah.
you get that stretch where you're like, all right, my legs are starting to give out, my mind is starting to tell me to quit. What do you do to push through that?
Yeah, it was really being surrounded by. I'd never done a race before. Running is very new for me in leading up to this. So there's thousands of people running, which was pretty impressive. Got me through that first 3/4 of the race before my body wanted to really flop down to the ground. But watching other people around me, and really it got into just a head game of wits and playing games with with myself, really just telling myself, it's like trying to convince myself, okay, well, maybe we could just walk for 20 seconds. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna run faster then. I'm not walking. And it's like, okay, well, how about this? If we walk for like 15 seconds and then you run a little bit quicker, we'll catch up to the pace. And it's like back and forth. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna run to that lamppost. Okay, I'm just gonna run to that fire hydrant. Okay, and the goal was not to walk at all. And it was really 4 kilometers of back and forth, these 2 competing voices.
Yeah.
Really, and the battle, and yeah, it was
So a lot going
quite a
on
spectacle
here.
to watch. Yeah, this was the challenge, and you know, physically it was difficult, and I was shooting for a lofty goal that I hadn't run at a pace like that before, which was very exciting, and all that energy of all the people were very exciting, bringing me through a lot of that until
Yeah.
it was really everything kind of blacked out, and it was just me
Wow.
and that game, and a lot of stubbornness
That helps too.
Yeah.
So
Sarah will attest to it.
Yeah.
Very good.
I see nods in the back there. So you did finish, and what was that like? So when you pushed through it, you get to the end. What was that like? And then once you had time to recover, what did it teach you? As you sort of thought about it, other than I never want to do this again.
Sure.
Were there any things where you're like, wow, I learned some things maybe about myself through this process that I didn't know before?
Sure. Yeah. No. Coming across that last kilometer, hit that last kilometer is like, okay, I got in the surge of energy, and that got me about 100 yards. And then there was that last 900 yards of like, I'm just not gonna walk, and it was like heavy breathing, people like turning around, like what's coming at me, it was quite a sight to see, I'm sure. And as we got to the finish line, Sarah and the boys were there, and I just oblivious to them because I was so lost in just find that finish line, and but getting across it, really, I left everything there on the track, and it was. I saw my coach was there, and really I kind of just fell onto him because my legs were done, and it was really exciting. It was a very exciting time, and it was a lot of energy and lack of energy and all the in between that goes with that. As far as what I got out of it, learned, really setting, key to set a lofty goal, I think. It's a lot of things I got out of it, but the power of the goal and something to really drive yourself and stretch yourself towards. Being coached through the entire thing. I'd done some running years before leading up to it by myself unsuccessfully. So having a good coach and just the example of that, and then really just knowing that with putting in time and consistency, really, which I'm learning in a lot of things, and this specifically just showed me that anything is possible with certain key stuff, and I think it's the goal of coach and being careful of this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thanks for sharing some of your experience. Would you give Travis a thank you for getting up in front? Well, I love hearing the first-hand account because when we jump in a moment to a scripture that speaks about running a race, whether or not we've run a half marathon. We've all been in situations that you probably could relate to what Travis was saying. Man, I had to push forward. I had to struggle through this time, or there were times that were easier than others, and life can often feel that way. And I think as we enter into 2020, we're looking at the next mile of our race, right? We've got some things behind us. We've come this far, and yet as we enter into a new year. I know there can be differences in maybe where you're at entering that mile. maybe you're feeling good and you're just like, man, I'm coasting on adrenaline right now. Things are going great. I'm excited for what 2020 holds. Or maybe you're cresting over a hill going into 2020 and you're just like, man, like I'm going to need some people to carry me this next mile because this has been a tough stretch for me. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, it says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God." We were created to love God, to love each other. God has set before us a race. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." I like that verse because it uses the word walk. And sometimes, maybe in your race, you just got to walk. You just got to keep moving forward, right? And you got to not worry about the person who's on your left or on your right or who you're staring at in front of you. It's like, man, I'm just going to keep moving forward in my race, what has been laid out in front of me. And so as we look at, we're still early in 2020, I want to run with that metaphor a little bit and talk about what God may want to do in your life in this next mile of your race. And so the first thing, and Flavia, you can put this up. Oh, I just got control again. You don't run the race alone. It says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us." I love how he says we're surrounded. It's assuming that you're with other people already, and all of you are surrounded by this cloud of witnesses. We're talking about those who have gone before. Right? The whole chapter leading up to this chapter talks about all these heroes of the faith. And these are the people that have gone before. You read their stories in the Old Testament and you're like, man, these people were giants of the faith. But they're running the same direction I'm going. And may I draw inspiration from them. It says you got this cloud of witnesses that has gone before you. And so it says, let us, author's saying, let us run this race together. We're running a race that has had many run before us. And we serve the same God as those heroes of the faith. This cloud of witnesses, I think we can draw inspiration from those who came before us. And many of you may know the story of Roger Bannister. So for the longest time, trying to run a mile in under 4 minutes, the under 4 minute mile was seen to be, if not impossible, a very difficult thing to do. And there had been a long stretch, I think about 9 years or so, where the record hadn't really even changed or moved, and everyone was kind of looking at this thing and saying, man, like who can do this? Who's going to be the one to do this? Roger Bannister, really with very little training, started going after this goal. I'm going to be the one to run this mile in under 4 minutes. And so in 1954, in front of a crowd of a few thousand people, he raced along with several others, and he goes for it, and he runs, and they're setting this pace, and when he comes into the finish line, nobody really knows did he do it, and the announcer comes on and he gives this hilarious. He gives this long spiel like Roger Bannister doing this and this and this, and he gives sort of all these credentials and all these things, and everyone's like, "What was his time?" Like we know who he is. What was his time? And when he said, came in at 3, and the crowd goes so nuts that they don't hear the rest of it. All they hear was 3. He did it. He had run it. He had run a 3-minute, 59.4 second mile. Shatters, this record, breaks this new record. But here's what's fascinating to me. This had been like, who's going to do this? Like who can run this mile under 4 minutes, and all these people are trying to do it. It's sort of this goal, they're trying to set this record. Finally, Roger Bannister does it, and they're like, it can be done. You know how long it took before somebody else beat his record? 46 days. You know what that tells me? Is that sometimes you just need to draw inspiration from those who go before you. Sometimes something that seems impossible only seems that way until it's done, right? Doesn't Han Solo say that in one of the Star Wars movies? Say, this is impossible. He says, I never say that until I've tried it. You know, I probably just butchered the quote. And it's like, you know, until you see someone do it, you can draw this inspiration. Like, man, like that person, they managed to get through this journey, this difficulty. If they can do it, maybe I can do it too. It says you've got a cloud of witnesses that have gone before you. You don't run this race alone. There have been those who have gone ahead of you, but you're also part of a group of runners right now. You've got a church family. You got people who are saying, hey, we're running this thing together. You're not struggling on your own unless you choose to, right? It's like you got people who are running with you. And I remember, I tried to find a picture of my brother and I running together for this story, and I couldn't find one, so instead I found one of him dressed like a Ninja Turtle and me dressed like Mr. Rogers. So, you know, close second. But so my brother and I, we used to go to this thing in Tabor. Anyone been to Tabor? Tabor in Alberta, Tabor Corn Fest. At the end of the summer, it was the greatest thing ever, and they would always do a 5K. So you know, Travis, this is my running experience. I've never run more than the 5K, and the 5K almost killed me. And I remember going into this 5K. My brother was always a better runner than I was, and I'm going into this thing, you know, kind of cold turkey. Haven't really trained for it or anything, but it was tradition. It's like, well, all the family goes to, you know, Tabor Corn Fest every year, and we all run in the 5K. And so I'm going to run in the 5K, and I'm going, and my brother takes pity on his poor, out-of-shape older brother. And we're running, and every time he'd get a little bit ahead, he'd sort of pull back, right? And I'm like, like hobbling along, trying to catch up to him. We'd run for a little bit together. He'd get a little bit further ahead, and he'd look back, you know, like, you know, I haven't heard labored breathing in a while. Look back, and there's this brother, like, you know, crawling along, and he'd wait for me. And I remember we're coming to the end, right? We can see sort of that last 900 yards or whatever, and we're like, you know, I can see it, or it's a mirage, you know, one or the other. And we're coming in, and I remember at this point my brother had sort of pulled out, you know, a little bit ahead, and I mean, you get inspired when you see the end, and so he's going, and I still remember he's running, and he's like really close to the finish line. And he realizes I'm not with him. It's like, man, I gotta stick with him to the end. And so he turns around and waits, and he just sort of does one of these, you know, like just barely going. It's like, come on, man, like let's do this. And I see him, I draw this inspiration, like, man, like I can do it. Like I can get across this thing, and I just like dig deep. And I find whatever reserves I can, and I just start, you know, moving one leg in front of the other. It's like, hey, it may not look pretty, but I'm gonna finish this thing. And I go running, and I catch up to my brother, and then I dig a little deeper, and I pass him. I'm like, sucker! And I crossed that finish line ahead of him, and for the next year, I told everybody that I beat my brother in the 5K. Now, not everything about that story translates into how we are to live. But you know, sometimes that's what you need. You need somebody who's like, man, you're not running this thing by yourself. I love what it says here. It's not only that you have a cloud of witnesses that have gone before you, and they're like, you can get this picture of them cheering you on from the sidelines, right? Travis, you come in through that finish line, and your wife and kids are there, like, at least you saw them later. And it's like, man, the people on the sidelines, the people who have already made it, the people who are there at the end cheering you on that last mile. But it says, but therefore, since we are surrounded by these witnesses, let us. He's talking to a group. He's not talking to solo people. He's not saying, hey, you just dig deep and run your race. He's saying, like, you run together with other people. And there's going to be times when you're like, man, I need someone to slow down and just, like, link arms with me and drag me a little bit further until I catch my breath and I can keep going. And there's a lot of great pictures of the church, but I love that picture of running together as a church family. And I would ask you tonight, are you running your race alone? Or are you allowing others to run that race with you? Because sometimes it's not as if we don't have people to run with us. Because sometimes it's hard to trust people, or maybe we wanted to tackle it alone. Let me encourage you tonight that the race that Scripture talks about, it's a race that's better run with other people. And I would encourage you, find those people around your life that'll go with you. They'll be pace setters for you. They'll help you. And what you'll find is that if you get a good pace setter, they'll actually help you to run a better race, right? Annie's a runner, right? You find that, right? I found that when I run with Sarah, my time is way better than when I run by myself, because you're following the pace set by someone with you. Yesterday we had a group of maybe about a dozen of us from the church gathered up to do the first walk and talk, right? We'll be doing the hikes, but then for those who are like, don't know if hiking's I don't know if I'm that intense, these things are for you. As we gather together to go for a walk out in the beautiful place that we live, and we chat with each other as we go, and this was on my mind while we were walking, right? And being able to talk with others along the way, I was thinking about this verse, saying, what a great picture of walking with your church family. Just saying, hey, we're on this journey together. We're not racing each other to try to beat each other to the finish line. We're headed to the same finish line. And so let's help each other to get there. Let's run together. Second thing I see in this passage is there are things that will hinder you from running a successful race. If you're headed into 2020 and you're like, man, I know that God has put before me a race. I know that He's got this will for my life. I want to walk and follow Him. There are things that will hinder you from running an effective race. It says, let us lay aside every weight. It's interesting, a weight is not necessarily a bad thing, right? He goes on to say sin. Sin, by its own definition, is a bad thing. Sort of these morally corrupt things that will corrupt your character. A weight can be a good or a bad thing, but it's often a hindrance in a race, right? It might be good in another context, but in a race, all of a sudden a weight isn't good. We put some sandbags on our A-frame signs out front because the wind kept blowing them over. A sandbag, a weight, is a great thing if you need to hold down a A-frame sign. It's not a great thing if you're trying to run a race and you've got a sandbag on you. You don't want to be weighed down in your race. Now, you can't run naked, so you got to decide what are the things that I need to run this race effectively, right? And if you ask a runner, it's all about the shoes, for one. Make sure you have good shoes. It's like, what are these essential things that are going to help me run this race? What am I going to carry in with me? See, in our culture, we're often told things that we need to add into our lives, but we're not often told what we need to remove from our life. Right? You watch TV or something, and it's like, here's all the stuff that you need in your life. Like, if you just had this, or if you just added this, and what happens? Like, our garages and our storage rooms just pile up with more and more things, and we're just like, at a certain point, you sort of need somebody to come in and say, here's what you don't need. Like, the world will tell you all these things that you need to add into your life. Sometimes we just need to remove some things. What weights do you have in your life right now that are preventing you from running a successful race? This might be a couple things. One, it might just be extra stuff. Not good or bad stuff. Maybe just extra. Maybe you're just doing too much. Like, maybe you just got too much on your plate. And it's all good things. You know, sometimes the hardest choices in life are not between like good and bad things. It's between like good and best things, or it's between like necessary and unnecessary things. And I found that typically those who have pretty balanced or successful lives are oftentimes those who have learned how to prioritize well in their life. They've learned, hey, these are the things that I don't want to do. Sometimes you're like, man, have you ever looked at somebody and you're like, how do they get done all the things that they get done? And you're thinking like, if I had all day, I couldn't get half of what this person, they managed to like eat well and exercise and, serve in a charity and like all this stuff. And you're thinking like, man, I just sort of drag myself out of bed, stumble through my day, and I'm happy if like I go to bed and there's not dishes all over the kitchen. And you're just like, how do these other people do it? Oftentimes it comes down to prioritizing things, right? Removing the things that are unnecessary. in our culture, oftentimes the unnecessary things like, and I'm speaking to myself here, like this, to be honest with you, how much time you spend on your phone, right? And you're thinking like, man, if I cut out half of the time I spent just sort of doing nothing or scrolling through Facebook or whatever it might be, and I use that time to focus on something else, what would my life look like? What other things would I be able to do? Like, what kind of weights are in my life? And they're not necessarily bad things, they're just heavy. They're just not good for running a race. And so maybe there's some extra things, weights, but he goes on to say sin. There may also be some morally destructive things that you're like, I can pinpoint some things in my life, and these things are holding me back also. They're not just sort of unnecessary, they're actually damaging. Anger, pornography, jealousy, bad habits, overindulgence. Sin, by its very nature, is destructive. And so if you're running a race, trying to be a successful race, running to fulfill everything that God has laid out in front of you, and yet if we fill our lives with things that are destructive to who God created us to be, then all of a sudden those things are going to sabotage us along the way, and we're going to find ourselves saying, man, I can't get my anger under control, and it's destroying my relationships, and I'm not able to love the people God has called me to love because of this thing. And maybe in 2020, you need to enter 2020 and say, God, here's this thing in my life, and I don't know how to change it. I don't know if I have the power to change it. So would you do a work in my life? Would you remove these weights and these hindrances, these things, so that I might run a successful weight? Maybe you're like, I've raced. Maybe you're like, I've tried 100 different things and I can't do it. And maybe tonight you would lift that thing up to God and say, God, would you do that in my life? Would you remove this sin in my life? And the last thing is the key to running a successful race is to keep your eyes on Jesus. Travis, you were saying you find those things to focus on, right? It's like, okay, if I can get to that lamppost, like if I can get to, if I can get to this rock, if I can get to that tree, and you just keep thinking like, man, what you focus on is going to direct where you're going. It says, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. Like the reason we're doing this and the reason we can do this is because of him. And then it says, it sort of talks about the race that Jesus ran. It says, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. It says he faced something incredibly difficult because he knew what was beyond that. It says the joy that was set before him, because he had his eyes fixed on that, he could endure the cross. It says, despise the shame. He knew what this would entail, and he could face it anyways, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. It says he finished his race. He did it, and now he can lead you to finish yours. Like he's there at the finish line cheering you on, and as we read in Scripture and get deeper into what does it mean to walk in faith as a Christian, we realize God actually runs with us. He helps us along. He's not just cheering us on from the sidelines or from the end, but he actually goes with us. Here's another old picture from the vaults. This is my brother and I, and my cousin Elizabeth. Now, this was a long time ago because Elizabeth is now, she's in college. She may be graduated college by now, all grown up. But this was when she was just a little girl, and we had a family reunion. And we were playing, I think it was kickball or baseball or softball, so some version of one of those games. We're playing this as a family, and little Elizabeth gets up there, right? And has her little bat, person's kind of like right up close to the ball, and it's like, all right, Elizabeth, and they sort of throw the little ball, and she just kind of bunts it. And of course, we all just start cheering. Both sides, both teams were like, go Elizabeth, run, run. And then she drops the bat and she runs to first base, and all the uncles and cousins are like letting her do it, right? We're like stumbling over each other and like trying to throw the ball and intentionally missing it and stuff. And she rounds first base. We're like, go to second. And she gets to second. Go to third. She gets to third. And then we all start yelling, Elizabeth, run home, run home. And she stands there for a minute on third base. And then she turns around and starts running the opposite direction. And we're like, where's she going? Like, someone catch her. And they chase after her, and she runs back to, like, the little hotel, like, motel room thing that we were staying in. Like, she ran, everyone's going, run home. And she realized they're saying, home plate. And so she runs back to our lodging. We're like, wait, Elizabeth, no, not that home. We're going to chase after her. Many people are trying to live their hardest to live right, but they're focused on the wrong thing. And here's the thing, it doesn't help to lay aside the weights and then run in the wrong direction. Right? You can say, oh, I'm gonna like lay aside this stuff so I can run my race. But then sometimes it's easy for us to focus on the wrong thing. And it's like, man, I'm running this race pretty fast, but I'm going the wrong direction. They say, focus on Jesus. Let him be the one that guides you so you're running in the right direction, so you're running towards that which he has set before you. It says the race that is set before us. It's like the race is in front of you. God has put the race in front of you. It's not like we choose our race, right? It's like, here's what it is. Here's what's in front of you. Now fix your eyes on Jesus, and that will allow you to run in the right direction. It implies there's a specific race for us to run. My brother, who I talked about earlier, this is him. He's become a great runner. Runs pushing his two little twin boys, and he's a great runner. He's been running marathons now and half marathons, and he went out one time for a training run, and while he's running, he turns this corner, and all of a sudden there's people like lined up on the streets cheering him on. And there's people like handing him water, and they're like, come on, you can do it. And he's just running. He's just like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, I just went out for a run, and all of a sudden there's these passing people who are clapping him on the back, and great job, come on, you can do it. And he's running, and it takes him a minute to realize that in his route, he had accidentally intersected into a breast cancer run. And he had sort of gotten caught up with Julie, kind of like how we caught you. We were walking yesterday, and Julie's walking with us, and we're like, hey, how'd you hear about the Canvas walk and stuff? And she's like, I'm not part of the Canvas walk. We're like, well, you are now. Like a big snowball. We just kind of caught her on the stairs, I think, as we were going out from Willows, and she stuck with us, and here she is tonight. So grateful to have you with us. It's like my brother's just like entered into this wrong race, and it's like, man, all these people are cheering me on, but this isn't my race. He wasn't paying attention, and when you're not paying attention, it's easy to find yourself maybe running in the wrong race, and you're thinking like, man, like what's going on in my life? It's like, well, have you fixed your eyes on Jesus, the one who's going to direct you the race that you are to run? And sometimes when we beat ourselves up a lot, it's because we're comparing ourselves to other people who are running different races, right? And it's like, man, why can't I be like this person? Well, because God set before them a race unique to them. And so don't compare yourself to that person, right? They're running their race. You've got a unique race before you that God has put before you. Don't beat yourself up when you look at the others around you and you're like, man, why are these guys seem to be doing so well and I'm struggling? Probably they're not doing as well as they seem to be, but also they're running a different race. Let's run ours. So how do we stay focused on the race before us? If we focus on Jesus. Say, Jesus, keep my eyes from drifting to all the many distractions that life throws at me, so that in 2020, I can run the race that you've put before me. He is the one who set our race. He's the one who makes our race possible. And so let him lead you in 2020. I'm going to invite Jake back up, and he's just going to play some music here for a moment, and we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. So on every seat, you should find now some of you who are sitting in rows that we added, which is awesome. Love adding rows. We added some rows. Sarah's going to be at the back with some of these if you don't have this on your seat. But on your seat, you're going to find some things. Again, if you don't have this on your seat, Sarah's going to have some of those at the back. There's going to be a card. If you're like, man, what do I do with this? You bend it in half, and there should be a pen, and there should be an envelope on there. And this is something that I've done with groups before and have participated in. And I really think it's a neat way to capture the race ahead of us, but